Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Teachers Retirement System Board meeting for January 24th, 2019. Patricia, would you please call the roll?
John Adler.
I am here.
Thomas Brown.
Here.
David Kazansky.
Present.
Lindsay Oates.
Present.
Deborah Penny. Susanna Vickers.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Okay, take it away.
All right, next on the agenda is an update on TRS operations, which we'll get from Kavita Kamra.
As previously stated, TRS is going greener. Starting this quarter, we will be providing our quarterly account statements and TDA deferral statements to members electronically. As a result of this change, 98% of members will now receive their quarterly account statements electronically, and 70% of members will receive their TDA deferral statements electronically. The fourth quarter statement for in-service and on-leave members should be available for secure online viewing during this week of February 4th. The TDA statement for retirees should be available for secure viewing as of January 25th. On December 28, 2018, TRS filed its June 30th, 2018 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report with the Government Finance Officers Association, the GFOA. The CAFR has been posted online to the TRS website as well.
Thank you, Kavita. Next on the agenda is a report from the actuary.
Thanks, Patricia. Everybody should have the memo that's the 2019 assumptions and methods for 2019 AIM. I can walk through that with you guys. So this is a package of actual assumptions and methods that I am proposing to be used to calculate the employer contributions starting in fiscal year 2019. And according to state statute, it does require the actuary to formally review these assumptions and methods every 5 years. That doesn't mean that within those 5 years I'm not looking at these assumptions, because informally, every time I sign off my contributions and evaluation, I do look at the assumptions. And you might recall, for example, in 2015, there was a change to fiscal year 2016 employer contributions with the mortality assumption update, as well as the change in the actual evaluation of assets for that methodology. So it is something that is reviewed at most every 5 years, but sometimes more frequent than that. With that said, there is also independent of that, there's also the auditors, the actual auditors that are commissioned by the Comptroller's Office. Every 2 years they do a study on the assumptions and the methods, and they have 2 engagements each time they do it, so it is a 4-year period when they are hired. And during these 4 years that they are contracted, they do give suggestions, and the current actuaries are Bolton, and their role is to, basically it's an advisory role. What they recommend is not necessarily what needs to be adopted. The actuary does make the final decision and make the recommendations to the board. But with that said, this package of assumptions and methods, they do take Bolton's considerations, recommendations into consideration. It is mainly based on their recommendations with some tweaks to it, some of which include smoothing out some of the changes that they say. They don't actually provide tables of what they recommend. They not verbally, but in words, they say, reduce these rates 25% or, increase them 40%, something like that. So we actually, we take their suggestions and we apply it to the current tables, but sometimes that gives, skewy results, because it might be, decrement rates might be like 0.453, and, nothing's really that precise. So, there is some smoothing involved in that. As well as, after we make those changes, we have to compare it to other assumptions within the package to make sure that collectively they do make sense. So it's not just taking those suggestions, but there's work in addition to that. And additionally, on top of what Bolton had recommended, I actually also proposing a mortality improvement scale change. That was a assumption that they did not look at, just because mortality improvement means not just what the mortality rates are, but how do the mortality rates improve in the future because of medical advancements, technological advancements, and all that. And so that's not something commonly that auditors look at, just because you need a massive amount of data for that. So, in a nutshell, that's what this package consists of. If you have it in front of you and you want to turn to page 2, the assumptions are broken out between demographic and economic assumptions. So demographic assumptions have more to do with people. So when do the members retire? When they become disabled? When might they die? And then there's economic assumptions that have more to do with money. So salary assumptions are on there. Discount rate is in there as well. CPI also. So as far as the demographic assumptions go, mainly there's no change, but if there is a change, it's mostly to increase some of these assumptions. And the increases fall in a couple of buckets to generalize it. One is the female mortality rates. So female mortality rates for females, they are not projected to live as long as we thought they were, and that's just, I think, a product of the mortality disparity between the two genders closing in, and the males are catching up and the females aren't. The margin between the two isn't as drastic as before. The other category of where these rates increase was retirement. So the service retirement rates are broken out between mandated plans and elected plans. So for people who elected a plan, meaning those people who paid additional contributions for the right to retire earlier, those people probably went into that election with the intent to retire earlier, and that's why they paid that extra amount. So we did see an increase in retirement rates for people who elected to be in the plan. For those who didn't, they people are leaving at the first opportunity they can, meaning the early retirement. There's an increase in that. And for the other members, they're not leaving right when you get the chance to. They're otherwise staying on longer. So you'll see that for the mandated plan, for the regular retirement, not early retirement, there actually is a decrease for the first year, meaning people are living a little bit longer. Consistently through some of these tables, we are extending the table itself because people have longer careers and they're working longer. So we extended some of these ages to further out to reflect the longer career service life. As far as mortality for healthy service retirees, the males did decrease. The rates decreased about 11% across the board. So you'll see that being reflected. And again, I adopted the most recent improvement scale, which is MP 2018. So the Society of Actuaries is a professional actual organization, and they have these committees that look at mortality rates and look at how these mortality rates are changing over time. And each year they put out an improvement scale. So this improvement scale, again, is applied to these base mortality rates. And again, they are supposed to account for changes in these mortality rates in the future because generally speaking, you think of a 65-year-old today has a certain life expectancy, but presumably the 65-year-old in the future is going to have a longer life expectancy because maybe we find a cure for cancer, or maybe there's other drugs out there that we discover that can preventative care and better diets and all that. So in a nutshell, that's what improvement scale does. And then as far as economic assumption goes, there's no recommended changes on that front. For the methodologies, there's technically no change to the methodologies. There is a minor tweak of how we roll forward the normal cost. New York City is under a one-year lag methodology, so when we do the calculations, so for example, for fiscal year 2019 contributions, we're doing the valuation is technically as of June 30th, 2017. So when you calculate those values, you actually need to state them in fiscal year 2019 terms. So you have to do a roll forward. there was a change in how we roll forward the method of the normal cost. So after everything that's said and done, all the recommendations put into place, when you apply this to the preliminary fiscal year 2019 contributions, you'll see approximately $70 million decrease in contributions between the preliminary and the final. I just want to caution that don't just take the preliminary contributions and subtract out 70 million and think that's the final, because there might be some other changes, including demographic changes. And then in Appendix B, you'll see the actual tables where we applied, some of the recommendations, did some of the smoothing, extended some of the rates out, and these are the actual rates that would be used when adopted to come up with the employer contribution. A lot of information. So I know that this is not meant to be digested in just 1 week, because this was sent out last week, nor in one sit-down meeting. So if you guys have any questions right now, I'll be happy to address them. I'm also available if you guys do not want to move and pass this resolution today. I'm also available for to answer emails, phone calls, do office visits. You guys are welcome to come to my office as well.
So questions for Sherry?
Actually, I have one. So I believe it was P&I where I read that the Society of Actuaries just released some new mortality tables.
Base table, yeah.
Are those the ones that are being used here, or are those the ones that will be used for, I guess, the next go-round?
So the table that the Society of Actuaries published is based off of national data from various public pension plans, and that is the industry norm table for public plans that usually public plans would use if they don't have enough data and like active lives basically to come up with their own table. So for New York City, because we are a larger plan and we are the largest municipality plan in the country, we actually do have enough data to produce our own tables. And so the tables that are here are actually from our own demographic and our own population. So it's more precise and it fits our demographic better than if we would use a nationwide table.
Great, thank you.
Other questions for Sherry? I, for one, would like to digest these materials as opposed to moving the resolutions today. So unless there are objections, we'll take up Sherry's invitation to postpone consideration of the proposed resolutions until future meeting.
So when we get to the executive director's report, there'll be a motion to lay over the two resolutions that were distributed.
Okay.
Okay.
Sounds good. Okay. Thank you, Sherry.
Welcome. So then the second agenda item on my report is the option factors.
Okay.
These option factors are proposed to be effective as of April 1st. It's not an April Fool's joke. If you have the memo in front of you, again, I can walk you through it. So the last time these option factors were updated was August 19th of 1985. So
Recently.
Semi-recently, right? We should do the 30-some year challenge with the, how much has changed, like on social media right now, 10-year challenge. Yeah. Anyway, so a lot's changed in the world, and including mortality and life expectancy, mortality rates and life expectancy. So, with reflecting that a lot has changed in terms of life expectancy, as well as the new tables that are being proposed under the 2019 A&M, there is a recommendation to update these option factors. And so to give you a little background about what option factors are, so when a member retires, the default is the maximum, it's called maximum retirement allowance, which is really a New York City term. In other words, it's a single life annuity. If they choose not to elect it, they have options. to elect another form of payment, such as joint survivor, 10-year certain, and other combinations. If they do elect a option that is not the maximum, then there is a conversion factor that is applied to their maximum benefit so that it is actuarially equivalent. Because, it might be because there's another life involved, their spouse or another beneficiary, and you have to make sure that, on an actuarial basis that they're being paid out the same if they were to elect the maximum or if they were to elect an option. So in deriving option factors, there's two assumptions that are used to derive these factors. It's the interest rate and the mortality tables, and I can speak a little bit more about that a little bit later. And so these option factors are, again, like I said, to be effective April 1st, 2019. So for the easy case is for anybody who's going to be hired after April 1st, 2019. For those people, they would have just this one set of option factors unless another set gets introduced in the future. So they would just be under this new set of factors. For those that would, for those who are hired before April 1st and retire after April 1st, 2019, then they would have their benefit calculated over the multiple sets of factors, and whatever produces the highest benefit amount is what they would be due. And this is because of constitutional protection. And we obviously did an analysis to see how many people would have a lower benefit versus higher benefit. And generally speaking, a large majority, almost in all cases, they would be benefiting under the newest set of option factors anyway. And these option factors, because they can also be applied to when you try to convert a lump sum into an annuity. So these annuity factors aren't just one way; they can be used the other way as well. So it is kind of, again, a package where if you adopt these assumptions to produce these option factors, they're also recommended to be used for converting, annuitizing like loan balances when they retire, and also the TDA, because that's a lump sum value. To convert that into an annuity, you would also be using equivalent factors for that. So in deriving it, first we take the base tables. These base tables are the same as in the other memo, so if you actually compare them to, they are the same tables. So you take these tables and then we applied an improvement scale onto it. The improvement scale, we applied it until the year 2024 because every 10 years, we're not going to wait another 30-some years. If I'm still here, I'm going to be recommending this 10 years from now, approximately 10 years from now, again. And we just took the midpoint because I will be recommending it 10 years from now. I'm taking the midpoint of the improvement because if you don't apply this projection scale, you're underestimating the improvement basically. And if you do apply it all the way to the end of the period in 10 years, you're overestimating. So obviously getting the midpoint makes most sense. And then after we take these base tables, apply the improvement scale, we blend the tables because, by law, we have to use unisex factors right now. You can't have different factors for male and female. And when we blend it, we use actual demographics of TRS members, which is approximately 77.2% female and 22.8% male. And when you do the beneficiaries, we also have to blend the table for beneficiaries, and we would blend it using the inverse. So instead of 77.2% female, we would assume 77.2% male remaining. As I said, the assumptions, the interest rate is just both the interest rate assumption and the mortality assumption is evaluation assumptions. So the interest rate would be the 7% for the fixed balances and 4% for the variable accounts. And then the mortality table, as I said, is the same as what is previously proposed, which is what was going to be used for the valuation. As far as financial impact goes, there's no change to funding and employer contributions. There's no change with the adoption of these factors. That is because of two interrelated things. One is because that when we value when we look at, when we do the valuation and we look at the retired population and we value what their present value benefit is, we're actually calculating and using their maximum. We're not, even if they're taking a we assume that they're going to take the maximum investment value. And the reason why we do that is because they're actually equivalent. So even if they, when they come time to retire and they elect an option that's not the maximum, it's supposed to be actually equivalent. So the present value basis is the same. So because of that, there's no change in funding. And the next section just talks about the constitutional guarantee, so that it breaks it out between members that were hired before the last time factors were introduced, between the time last was introduced and this time, and then for those members who enter into TRS after the introduction of these factors. So it just tells you, what basis that that they would have their benefits valued under to make sure that they get the best of all the options. And then below that are some example, different ages, different combinations of options that they have, including J&S and the certain in life. And it tells you, it breaks out between service retirement as well as disability, between the fixed fund and the variable fund. And you'll see, comparison on the right-hand side, you'll see what the percentage increase is for most of all these members, except for a few on the back. But again, it is footnoted and emphasized that if it is a negative number, meaning that they're worse off under the new basis, that we're capping that, so to speak, at 0%, or flooring that, I should say, at 0%, so that they're not losing out. It's a range, but it's approximately anywhere from 0% to 4% that members will see an increase in their benefits. Again, and if you're interested, these are the mortality tables that are the same. And if you guys have any questions, I invite you also to email me, call me, or come by my office.
Let's see if anyone has questions today about
Or today, I'm happy to answer that as well.
the option factors.
Questions for Sherry about the option factors?
I'm sure I actually have a question. So these option factors were last updated in 1985.
Yeah.
So why implement them? What's the significance of April 1st?
It's a time that we can get them in, and it's something that probably should have been before this, but through the studies of various other things, I don't think that there is a reason for why it shouldn't be after that. April 1st is something I think administratively that it's enough time to give to the board. It's enough time to obviously incorporate the changes that I'm packaging with the 2019 A&M. It gives the staff enough time to put this in their system before it goes live, and at the same time, it's enough time to let people know, and if they want to, make sure that they, if they're thinking about retirement, they know what their options are, and they can be counseled by TRS.
The reason one of the things that struck me just listening to it is that, and I turn to the DOE employees here for more guidance, or perhaps the TRS employees. But what strikes me is I think that most folks are retire and are hired in the period in between the end of the school year and the beginning of the next school year. And so April 1st just seems like sort of an arbitrary date as far as the school calendar goes. And I'm just wondering whether June 30th or July 1st, which is also the start of the fiscal year, might make more sense as a date to implement this change. And I'm asking a question, I don't know the answer.
So you're saying they're mostly hired during the summer?
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. So this is actually for hires anytime after on April 1st or after April 1st. So it would catch that class, so to speak.
But it's also for retirements. In other words, the folks who retire get the choice, right, who are currently employed. I don't know, it just strikes me
So
that it might make more
anybody,
sense from
usually I would think that.
I'm sorry, I didn't finish my point. It might make more sense from an administrative point of view to do it consistent with the TRS plan year, consistent with the school year, and when most folks are hired and or retired. I'm just throwing that out. I don't know, and I sort of asked the TRS folks as well as the DOE folks what your thoughts are on that.
So, from my perspective, I think there's two things. One is that if they're implemented in April, then they're already in the system, and TRS gets pretty hectic around June and July with retirements, and to add one more thing on and around that same time, and I can't speak to how that all works, might be just an internal problem. But the other thing is, Sherry, correct me if I'm wrong, you said that these factors might indeed be better for some folks, and so if they go and they're implemented in April, the people who retired this year might actually benefit from these option factors. Okay. So I don't have a problem with that.
And also, I just want to raise the point that, as fiduciaries, if you have information in front of you and saying that this is the most updated and these are, the most prudent assumptions to use, I don't think it's prudent to wait on those either.
Well,
Wait longer than administrative time.
I'm not sure.
I can't
3
change the
months
past
past.
laws.
3 months.
You can.
More
I
than
can't change
from
the past.
1985. It really is
And I think-
as an illustration of lack of prudence myself.
I think that actually supports the point of doing it sooner rather than later.
Which is, it could add to the confusion if June, July are the retirements and did this July
middle.
1st, right in the middle of it,
Uh.
I think you would actually add to the
Okay,
confusion.
that's
and-
what, that
and
was really my
difficulty.
question. I didn't know. Is it the operation people feel that way too? It'd be better to get it in place April 1st?
I think so.
Yeah,
You do.
from retirement standpoint.
Okay. Great, thanks. Other questions for Sherry? So let me just pose it then. Do we want it, we already, I think, agreed that we're gonna lay it over the first one, but the second one, you wanna lay that over?
I think so.
Okay. Okay. Okay, anything else?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
you.
Okay, so next is the executive director's report, and the first item on that is the next meeting, and it's been suggested that the next regular meeting for the Teachers Retirement Board be held on the fourth Thursday of the month, February 28th, 2019. Mark the calendars. Second item is the resolution to the proposed changes in actuarial assumptions and methods.
So I think there's a consensus to lay that resolution over.
I think you have to take a vote.
We have to take a vote? I don't think for a layover, I don't think we have to take a vote.
It's not
Usually-
consensus.
Usually you agree to lay it over.
Yeah, we just agree to lay it over.
Just agree to lay it over.
Yeah.
The
Yeah,
board,
are
the
any-
trustee did.
Any objections?
all-
Are there any objections by the trustees to lay that proposed resolution over?
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, and the next is the resolution for the proposed changes in option factors.
Again, I think we have
Lay that over.
agreement to lay that one over. Any objections to laying that? Okay.
Okay, next is the calendar. And the first item on the calendar is the matter of the approval of the minutes for the month of December, which includes December 6th investment meeting minutes, December 17th SIM meeting minutes, and the December 20th, 2018 board meeting minutes.
So I believe there's a request to lay over consideration of the December 17th SIM meeting minutes.
Correct.
Does anybody object to laying over consideration of those? Okay. And then we have the December 6th investment meeting minutes and December 20th board meeting minutes. Is there a motion to do those together, right? Is there a motion to approve the minutes for December 6th and December 20th
So
meetings? Thank you. Tom, is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Susanna. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion to approve the December 6th and December 20th minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, please say nay. Any abstentions? Okay, motion carries.
Next is the calendar, and you will,
Please waive the reading of the calendar.
okay, you all should have received an electronic version of the calendar.
Great, so is there a motion to approve the January calendar?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Kazansky. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion to approve the January calendar, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say nay. Any abstentions? Okay, the calendar is approved.
Next is other business before the board.
Any other business? I think so.
All right, and then questions and comments from the public.
Any questions or comments from the public? Okay. Okay, I believe that concludes our agenda for today. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion to adjourn, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say no. Motion carries. Meeting is adjourned.